Hi, as it's holiday time, I thought this would be the great time to do a video about how you could teach your children to knit. I learnt to knit when I was about 7 or 8 years old, taught by my mum and my grandma, and it's given me this lifelong skill that I've used throughout my life, and really enjoyed, from a child knitting my little teddy scarves and dolls blankets right through to now being sort of a more mature adult who really enjoys and appreciates creating their own clothes and be able to customize what I knit and what I wear and really enjoy the process, and also meeting some wonderful people through the joy of knitting and yarn. So I think it's a really important life skill to teach young people, particularly when they've got time on their hands and you want to do something quiet and together with them and get them away from their screens. I think this is a perfect opportunity to teach them, and I thought I'd do a quick video sort of just passing on what I've learned from teaching children here in the shop, about how best to teach them how to knit and how to get the best out of it for both you and them as well. So what are the great things about knitting? Well, I mentioned earlier, it does give you some one-to-one time with your child, but also it does mean that you can get them away from their screens. And we all know that children can spend an awfully long time looking at digital screens. And this is a way of actually taking their mind away from that and focusing on something else. Of course, it's portable. You can do it virtually anywhere, stuck in a waiting room, stuck in a queue, sitting when you're bored, when your parents are eating food and chatting. You could your child could pick up their knitting and just do something creative and in a way that you're not worried about what they're up to and what they're doing. You can it's really good for their mental health. It's proven to be really good for anxiety. It's really good at calming people down. It's something that they can do sociably with friends. It helps them to make new friends. People always are, when somebody sees somebody out knitting, they'll always ask what they're doing and what they're up to. So it's a great way of actually meeting people and making friends, and hopefully your child will find others who are really interested in what they're doing, and they will be able to pass on these life skills to those children too. And it enables them to be really creative and also create gifts for families and friends, and really sort of explore that side of their sort of nature and that creativity and what it can bring to their lives too. So it's a great thing to teach your children. It's really rewarding for you as a parent or as somebody that's looking after that child, just seeing their sense of achievement in what they're creating. And when they finally get it, it's a really, really fabulous thing to do. So what age do I think it's a really good time to teach children to knit? I think 7 to 8 is a really good age to start. Younger than that it depends on the child, obviously, but younger than that, it might be sort of quite a difficult skill to learn. But the reason I sort of say that age is because that's the age that you tend to notice children have the sort of coordination and the motor skills to be able to hold the needles and grasp them and sort of perform the function of doing the knitting. Also, their concentration levels are better at that age. And it's really important that they are interested in doing it too. Just because you knit or your grandma knits or you might want them to knit, you really must make sure that it's something that they want to do too. Hopefully once they start, they'll be hooked and they will be able to go on and develop this skill as they get older. I think some top tips from me around teaching children to knit is to make sure that you keep those lessons really short. Their attention span is not going to last forever. So make them sort of fun sessions that you sit down together in a quiet, relaxed space. Let them choose the yarn that they're going to use. Let them pick what they want to make. Make it achievable. So don't let them pick a massive project that's going to take them a long time to do, because they'll lose interest. So make it really simple, and I'll give you some ideas of what sorts of things children like to knit and good starting points too. As I said, make it fun, really get get them to enjoy the process of knitting. If you notice that they start to get distracted or bored, that's the time to pop it down, and then you can come back and pick it up another time. The other thing I should mention about sort of keeping it short is that little hands might start to ache. It might be an unfamiliar position for them to be in. You don't want to, a bit like sort of overdoing exercise on your first day. I'm sure we've all done that when you wake up the next day and you're aching and you think, I'm not sure this is good for me. Same with knitting, you know, your hands can start to ache if it's unfamiliar to you. With these projects, just don't focus on them being perfect. You know, we all learn, don't we, at different stages, and we all learn different skills. And I know when I started, mine wasn't perfect. I had loads of holes in it, loads of missed stitches or misformed stitches. But that's not the point. The point is that they've created something and they're really going to be proud of it, and so are you. And whether they keep it for themselves or gift it to someone, it's their first bit of knitting, and it really doesn't have to be perfect. Although learning to cast on is an important part of knitting, I would suggest really for little ones, it's probably best if you know yourself how to do it, is to cast on a few stitches, 10, 15, 20 stitches, and maybe knit a row or two yourself, so they've got something to work on. I mean, casting on, I will show you a couple of simple methods of cast ons, the one that I learnt as a child. But I think the very first few times, if you get them set up to do it, I think they will enjoy the experience much more. And, you know, as I said, it's not going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And occasionally you might have to be the knit fairy that sort of overnight just corrects a couple of those mistakes, so that when they pick it up again, they can just carry on with it, with you sort of having fixed a few of the sort of things that you can fix without it sort of completely changing the nature of what they've been doing. Yeah, so I would say, you know, just don't worry about perfection, just worry about the enjoyment of the experience and at getting them to explore their creativity. So what do you need? Obviously, there are needles specifically designed for children. We have these children's knitting needles, Pony by Pony. These are a 5mm needle here. Sorry, I'm going on the wrong side. So a US 8. I know some people suggest knitting on really thick, big needles, but I find that they're really hard ergonomically for your children to hold. I think they're hard for adults to hold as a learner. And these sort of medium-sized ones, I think, are the sort of best size for them to learn on. So these work with an Aran weight yarn, so sort of something like this, which is nice and smooth. So not too sort of fluffy, it's not going to split, so it's got a high twist on it. I don't know if you can see that, yeah. So it's got a high twist on it. That sort of weight yarn on this size needles is a really good place to start. It's not so thin that it's going to take them a long time, so they'll progress really quickly, but it's not so thick that it feels really uncomfortable in their hands. I know it's tempting because it will progress quickly, but believe me, many people that learn to knit on bigger needles with bigger yarn don't find it that comfortable an experience. So I've mentioned the yarn, so always look at something that's nice and smooth. There's another one here that I've got, a cream, which is again a nice smooth yarn, or something like this one, which has got like, and it's difficult to show you here, but in the middle of that is a chain. So that's sort of, you can't split it with your needles. You can't sort of muck it up too much using those sorts of yarns, but just any scrap yarns, perfect, that you've got hanging around of medium weight, that's smooth enough for your children to use. A couple of other things, a darning needle. So we have some plastic darning needles. Darning needles are always really blunt, so you don't have to worry about children sort of pricking their fingers and hurting themselves. I think as well, little stitch stoppers, you can get novelty ones, but little stitch stoppers that fit on the end of your needle, like so, can mean that once they've finished their little bit of knitting, it can mean that their knitting stays on and they don't lose stitches overnight, or if it goes into a bag, they don't lose them. Scissors, sort of a little pair of scissors. These little scissors are cute. Obviously you can get blunt tipped, these are quite sharp, but blunt tip scissors, but scissors just for trimming any sort of loose threads, but you might want to do that if they're really young for them when they get to that stage. A tape measure's handy to be able to measure their work. And as they progress, and it's just a little fun thing to do, maybe some, oh, it's hard to show you these stitch markers as well. We've got some fun little stitch markers here in the shop, which they can just use on their knitting to mark where they are. And it's a good way of helping them with their maths too, because you could say, or count 5 stitches, pop in a stitch marker, count another 5. And then it's a good way of getting them to think about maths too. And as they progress and start to look at patterns, I think maths comes into knitting quite a bit. So it's sort of a good byproduct of learning to knit. So that's all you need, you know, really simple. And I'm going to show you now literally how to cast on for sort of a very basic cast on. As I said, if they are new knitters and they are quite young, I suggest you cast on for them and knit a couple of rows. But if you want to teach them how to cast on, I'm going to show you a method. And then I would suggest that you just start with knit stitch and don't worry about any other more complicated stitches. That's the next phase. Just get them to master knit stitch, because that will get them holding their needles properly, get them sort of working with the yarn and understanding how they create a stitch. The sorts of things that they can make. So I've made a few samples here. So this is just a little purse, and I've got the little pattern here. So a little purse that I've made, I embroidered, I had some spare thread, did a little embroidery on the back so they can personalise their knitting, which makes it a nice little thing. So yeah, so the you knit here, you cast on, I think I cast on 15 stitches, knitted for about 6 inches or 15 centimetres, and then folded the first 2/3 together and sewed up the sides, and then the flap goes over the top, and I've added just a button that was in my sort of spare button box and embroidered on the back. One of the easiest things to start with is just a little bookmark. So this was casting on 12 stitches and just again knitting till as long as you wanted it to, and then I just embroidered on it. You know, your child can customize it the way they want to. They could have buttons, and they might want to gift this to, you know, friends, family. So that's a nice one. And another little simple one, and these won't fit me, but these are, I can't get them on, no, but they are fingerless mittens. So you knit that in exactly the same way you do this. You just knit a tube, 15 stitches for this little size. And then when you sew it up, you just leave a little hole here on either side. And I've just put buttons on the front just so that they can tell which is which. You don't have to, or you could embroider it. I suggest embroidering it before you sew it up because it will make it easier for them. But those are 3 little projects that are really achievable. They're straight knitting, knit stitch, and you know, making those sorts of things will encourage your children to pick up those needles and just give it a go. And once they've mastered that and got more confident, then you can take them on to the next stage. But this video here, I'm just going to deal with casting on, knit stitch, and binding off too, in the most simple way. Here in the shop as well, we just put together some little kids knitting kit bags just to help you along the way. So in that, we've popped in some children's needles, the darning needle, some lovely colourful little stitch markers. Oh, I think you get about half a dozen. And the stitch stoppers. And we've also put in an information sheet with a couple of those patterns that I've shown you today. And it will link to this video, of course, as well. So yeah, we have got them online if you are interested, but you might have all of this stuff at home. So we're just going to cast on now. So the first thing I'm going to teach you is how to do a slip knot. So for the basic thumb method cast on, I would suggest leaving quite a long tail because you're going to be using this sort of tail end to actually cast on some stitches. So I've got my working yarn here on my right, and my tail here is on my left hand side. So the way you do a slip knot, if you lay your yarn flat on the table and just taking the working end of the yarn, make a loop over the tail end. So from that, it goes over the top and the tail end, and then you pinch your fingers together, your thumb and your forefinger, pop it through the center of that hole, and then just pick up the working yarn and pull it through so that you get a loop like that. And that loop, the reason we use a slip knot is because it's adjustable, so it's not a rigid knot, and you can adjust the length of it. So I'll just show you that again. So lay it flat on the table, take the working yarn over the tail, pinch your fingers together through the middle and pick the working yarn and pull it through that loop to create your stitch. And you're going to pop that onto your needle and just tighten it off. Don't have it too tight, just so that it fits onto your needle. So now we've got the tail over here on our left hand side. The working yarn is still here on the right hand side. The thumb method is probably the simplest one to learn. So take your hand and you want the tail end just to drape across your palm, and you're going to stick your thumb up in the air. So grab that yarn and your thumb is stuck up in the air, and all you're going to do is rotate your thumb underneath the yarn and around so that you've got it crossing over here. I hope you can see that. And then you stick the tip of your needle through that loop, take your thumb out and just gently pull it up. Again, not too tight because you don't want to struggle to do the stitches afterwards. So once again, grabbing the yarn, thumbs up, rotate it underneath the yarn and around until it crosses over, and then you stick the right hand needle through that loop and take your thumb out. Once more, thumb up, rotate under and around and through that. So you continue on that way until you've got the required number of stitches on your needle. So this method is called the cable cast on. So this time I've put my slip stitch and I've left a tail of about 15 centimetres, about 6 inches. That's for weaving in at the end. If you had that too short, you run the risk of it unravelling when you finished it. So you need to be able to sew this in to secure that first stitch. So I'm going to pop that on my needle. And this time I'm holding my needle in my left hand. And basically it's a knit stitch, and this is why I probably suggest it's better if you cast on for your child first and then do a couple of rows, so that then they can just start learning the knit stitch, because once they've learnt that, they will be able to come back and learn how to do this cable cast on. So I insert the tip of my right hand needle through that slip knot on my needle. So now I've got this cross. And then for children with little hands, they'll probably grab the working yarn like this. Don't worry about the sort of technique as they hold it, their tension or anything else. This is just about learning the stitch. So what you're going to get them to do is wrap it around the tip of the right hand needle. And then you pull that needle through. And as you come through, you sort of grab the yarn underneath, lift it out, and then I rotate and slip it onto the needle. That's one stitch. So I'm going to do that again, pop my needle through, front to back. So I've got this cross, wrap my yarn around the tip of the bottom needle, and then I'm going to slide that bottom needle out. And when I get to this point, don't let them pull it all the way. You sort of rotate it so you can catch that thread, pull it out into a bigger loop, and then pop it onto the needle. Once more, front to back into the cross, wrap it round the back needle, pull it back through, and rotate. So that is called a cable cast on. Don't do it too tight because you don't want this bit too rigid. So it's just about learning how to do that. But as I said, I would suggest if you're teaching a child to knit, if you can, do cast on yourself first and knit a couple of rows so that they're working on something that they feel that they can get a sense of achievement with. So I've cast on 15 stitches and I've knitted 4 rows just to get the child started as they start. So if this is their first introduction to this, just get them holding the needles in a way that feels comfortable to them. And then I'm going to teach you just a little rhyme that I was taught when I was a child. There are certain variations of this rhyme, but this is the one that I was taught. So with my knit stitch, my next stitch, the little rhyme I was taught was inserting the needle through from front to back. So you go in through the front door, run around the back, so you wrap the yarn around, out through the window, and off jumps Jack. So you slide it from your left needle to your right needle. So if I do that again, so you go in through the front door, run once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack. In through the front door, run once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack. So this stitch is just the basic knit stitch, and what you're trying to do is just encourage them to get familiar with the needles, familiar with holding the yarn. They're going to do it a bit like that when they do it. But if you get them to use that rhyme, it really does help them think about what the next step is. So I'm going to go once more through it because I enjoy it. in through the front door, once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack. In through the front door, once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack. So this one, as you can see, if I was knitting that purse, as I said, I would just keep going with rows upon rows until I got to about 15 centimetres. And then I would cast off or bind off, as we call in the knitting terms. I'm not going to knit that far now. I'm just going to show you how a very simple bind off. As with cast on, there are multiple ways that you can do this, but I think we just need to keep it really simple for children, because this is the way I learned, and you know, it stood me in good stead all over the years. So I just think that this is a really great way to teach children how to knit. So casting off, or binding off as it's called. So you've got all your stitches on your needle. So this time, instead of knitting that first stitch, we're just going to slip it from the left needle to the right needle. So we just go as if we were going to knit it, but instead of doing anything else, we just do the off jumps Jack bit. Just slip it from one side to the other. The next stitch we knit as normal. So in through the front door, once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack. And now we have 2 stitches on that right hand needle. So what we need to do is lift this first stitch over the top of that second one that you've just knitted, so that it sort of secures it, and then you take it over the tip of the needle. So if you insert the point of your needle into that back stitch, I find it easier coming in this way. Lift it, so hopefully it's not too tight, so you're going to lift it and gently slide it, being careful not to slip the second stitch off, and over the top. So now you're left with 1 stitch on that right hand needle. So again, in through the front door, once around the back, out through the window, off jumps Jack, and now you have 2 stitches, and you do exactly the same. Insert the tip of that left hand needle, lift it gently up and slide it over the top. The main thing to be careful of is that they don't slide both stitches off, so just get them to do that bit gently. If they do, it's easy to pick it up, so don't worry too much. And you just work your way across your knitting, just adding a stitch at a time and then lifting up and over. And this is just a really neat way for children to learn how to cast off their knitting. As I said, obviously they're going to knit a bit longer than this, but it's just a way for me to show you how to do that. So hopefully that gave you all the tools that you need just to get your children started on their knitting journey. I'm sure once you start, you'll enjoy the process as much as they do. But as I said, just keep it short, keep it fun. Don't be too overambitious with what they want to knit. And think of all the lovely projects that they could knit and gifts that they could make, which would help them really sort of think about wanting to knit and wanting to pick up their knitting. And it is such a skill for life. You know, it's brought me so many friends, and I've made some wonderful things. So it's a great thing to learn. But I hope you enjoyed this intro to knitting video. Happy to do more to teach children how to do the sort of next steps, which is obviously learning purl stitch and maybe increasing and decreasing, but that's in the future. But do let me know what your thoughts are, and I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial video.